Ready.
You are live.
All right, good morning. It's 11 a.m. Tuesday, July 1st. This is a meeting of the Public Safety Committee. I'd like to call to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. All members are present. First item on the agenda is citizens' comments.
Carol Rice is first.
First. All right. First on the agenda.
Well, thank you for letting me speak, and I really appreciate your service. I actually understand how much time it
Carol,
takes.
Put the mic a little closer to your mouth.
Okay,
There you go.
better?
That's good, yep.
Does everybody hear me loud and clear?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to read you a whole little thing here. So, members of public safety, I stand before you today as a concerned resident of the Isle of Palms to advocate for the urgent adoption of a comprehensive hate crime law on our island. I hate that this is where we are, but this is where we are. We're one of 2 states without a hate crime law, and so each municipality really needs to handle it themselves at the moment. The very fabric of our community is woven with threads of diversity and mutual respect. However, recent events, both nationally and closer to home, remind us that hate-motivated acts continue to threaten these fundamental values. A hate crime is not just an attack on an individual. It's an assault on an entire community, instilling fear and eroding trust. A hate crime would provide our law enforcement with the necessary tools to appropriately investigate, prosecute, and deter crimes motivated by prejudice. It would send an unequivocal message that our island will not tolerate acts of violence, intimidation, or discrimination against anyone based on their race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, or any other protected characteristic. Such a law is not about creating new crimes, but rather acknowledging the severe impact of crimes fueled by bias. It recognizes that when a crime is motivated by hate, it carries a unique and profound harm that ripples through communities, leaving lasting scars. Implementing a hate crime law will reinforce our city's commitment to justice, equality, and the protection of all its residents and visitors. It will foster a more inclusive and welcoming environment where everyone feels safe and valued. I urge you, members of public safety, to prioritize the safety and well-being of every person on our island by enacting a hate crime law without delay. Let's stand united against hate and work towards a future where all individuals can thrive free from fear and discrimination. And thank you for your time. Carol Rice, 292 Forest Trail. Thank you.
Mark Friedrich.
Good morning. My name is Mark Friedrich. Thank you for allowing me to make a few comments regarding traffic attempting to leave the island driving recklessly through the residential neighborhoods between 41st and 21st Avenues when traffic backs up on Palm. My wife and I bought our home at 30th and Hartnett in 1986 and have lived in it full-time since then, except for several months away after Hurricane Hugo. We raised our 2 children here and now have local grandchildren that spend time on the island. I mention my length of time living on the island simply to give context to my observation that not many of our traffic problems are new or have happened overnight, and we won't solve them overnight. We've had traffic issues leaving the island before the connector was built, and have had traffic issues once it came online, even if they were reduced for a while. I understand that City Council and committees are exploring, or at least studying many possibilities that could help improve the traffic flow leaving the island, including restriping the connector for more lines, synchronizing the light at rifle range of the connector, reconfiguring the intersection of Palm and the connector, and possibly, of greatest importance, working to receive better assistance from the town of Mount Pleasant, the county, and the state. Most of these ideas could hold promise. However, even if approved, some of these changes could take years to implement. In the meantime, we'll be left with our current dangerous situation of traffic racing through residential neighborhoods. I hope that our city will continue to look for immediate, even if temporary, solutions that can be enacted inside residential areas within minutes as Palm begins to back up. This summer on busy days, we may not yet be able to speed up the traffic attempting to leave the island by Palm and the connector, but there are many ways to slow, direct, and manage traffic driving through any residential area. Well, thank you all for your time and your work for the city.
Julie Nessler.
Just a side note comment on that traffic. I think a couple weeks ago when the traffic was really bad, you had set a patrol car on our street, and it was the most civilized parting of people leaving the island and on our street. So I'm very grateful of that. And we actually even saw little kids switch drivers when they saw the police car coming down on the golf carts. So anyway, yeah, so thank you. That was a huge deterrent. Okay, so I'm here just for information. I would think it would help. I think it's all good stuff to help with the budgets. I don't know if you know, but I was nominated and danced in the Lung Association ball, Dancing with the Stars, raised money. Thank you, Mr. Streetman, for your donation. We raised like $400,000. I dedicated the dance to firefighters and first responders, police. In that, I did all my research. So, and the Palisades and Eaton fires had just taken place, so a lot of my research with toxicity and lung health was there. Anyway, as I dove down into that spiral of research and lung health, I found out that across the U.S., police stations and fire stations are ordering supplies from a company that's U.S.-based. And it's the Melaleuca Foundation. And it just so happens that it's non-toxic products that I purchase in my home because I'm all about lung health. However, little thing about Melaleuca, they were created in the wake of 9/11 terrorist attacks, where nearly $1 million they gifted to assist the families. In 2005, just hours after Hurricane Katrina, their foundation sent truckloads of relief supplies to the Gulf Coast and raised over $1 million for Katrina relief. So these are non-toxic products that you can purchase. They support first responders. When there is something that happens, they send the protein bars, the energy shots, the diaper wipes, the babies, they send truckloads. The website, I have some research here, but the website will show you everything. There was a woman in the Eaton fires that lost everything. She's a customer of theirs. They gave her money to support until she got on her feet. They donate health and wellness products to all law enforcement. They have contributed to donating land for police departments. They have donated chainsaws, generators, you name it. They support first responders. When you purchase from them, they are non-toxic, cost-effective, and I have price comparison from any cleaning supplies or coffees or anything that the city may need, first responders. But when you purchase from them, they give you a percentage back to a nonprofit of your choice. So you not only save money, their products are 9 times concentrated, you use less, they cost less, but then they give, and you get free products during every month, but they give money back to your nonprofit.
Ms. Nessler. you
Okay.
Exceeded the
All
3
right.
minutes.
The LENS program is a nonprofit. So the LENS program would get donated monies that in turn would help your departments. So I'll wrap it up. I have information. There's more to say about it, but maybe I'll, City Council. Anyway, if you're interested. It's a way to bring money and help to our community. Thank you.
Micah Swanson.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me have your time. My name is Micah Swanson, and I'm a local who has grown up and lived in the Charleston area my entire life. and I've been fishing, surf fishing for years, and I have transferred over into land-based shark fishing and some of the issues that have come up over the last meeting. And so I would just like to provide a little perspective from another lens. This has become a passion for me, and for this time I've learned many eco-friendly methods and become heavily involved in conservation initiatives. I've been tagging sharks for NOAA and their cooperative shark tagging program for 5 years. In that time, I have tagged close to 100 sharks, many in this area. I've handled and been around these animals for years and can provide, I feel like, another way to look at some of these things. I was very encouraged when I watched the previous committee meeting from last month, excuse me. Seeing the meeting made me feel emboldened to come speak and say what I had to say today on receptive, inclusive, and fair audience. I appreciate the members standing up for fishing and their equal rights with swimmers and other hobbyists on the beach. Sharing the public beach should be mandatory for all beach goers. We have to find a way to all get along, as you said. A fisherman should have no more rights than a swimmer, and a swimmer should have no more rights than a fisherman. So I just feel like I support a lot of the there being guidelines or rules may be necessary at this point to talk about. I think that's fair, and to keep order and the public safe. And I support a lot of the measures that the council put forward in the last meeting. No chumming, no commercial fishing, no drones. These are all things that seem reasonable that would keep helpful. Complete ban of no fishing of any certain kind, I feel like, is prejudice toward one certain group of people, and we all deserve our space and our time, or however it's figured out. I know you mentioned maybe different sections of the beach for different purposes, which seems a little harder than some of the ways that we kind of self-police ourselves, which I would like to share. There are ways to do this and coexist in a safe way for everyone, and everyone get to have their time. This guy who was running charters, the Shark Quest guy, he has moved to Florida. He is not here. I make it my business to know what's going on around on these beaches, because I know certain things aren't allowed, like the commercial fishing. So I had approached him in the past, and he no longer lives here. He's in Florida, so there's no more problems with drones. And to my knowledge, no one else is operating any kind of commercial fishing. It's exclusive recreational. So in closing, I would just like to offer a few suggestions to think about that we already take and measure, me and my friends that do these, participate in this hobby. So we've been doing it for years at Isle of Palms and all over beaches with no incident. We've just gone unnoticed, and that's part of the code of this whole thing, to keep people who aren't interested in it, feeling safe. So we have self-implemented code to be fair with others, and we've done and we're trying to do everything we can to keep our privilege, because we realize it's a privilege and a responsibility, and methods should be taken place. So maybe some of these could be used. For instance, we do not fish holiday weekends, which y'all mentioned was just too many people. It's just not the right time for stuff like that. We do not come to the beach from early May till after September, mid-September, until after 5, so that the beachgoers have their time. By the time we get all our stuff going at 6, 7, 8 o'clock, before there's actually fishing lines in the water, and that's done by design. This allows everyone to have their time. It allows, we have gear to keep the lines up so that people can walk in the surf and ride their bike, and they're not hassled or running into a line. We go to extreme extents to try to make sure that we are fair when we are out there.
Mr. Swanson, if you could
Yeah,
wrap
wrap
through
it
that,
up.
please. Thank you.
So, sorry, I'm not a great speaker, as you can tell. Most of all, this ban would be devastating because it would set precedent. And if it starts here, how y'all looked at Seabrook and everywhere else, people look at Isle of Palms did, and I feel like this is an opportunity to show that there can be a middle ground. And maybe we can implement a curfew or a seasonal ordinance from time to time, or, things of that nature. So before there's a final push for it, I would like for you guys to consider that, so that everyone can have their time and space. Thank you.
Josh, I'm not going to say your last name, so I'll butcher it.
Excuse me, are you going to stay during the discussion of that today?
Sure, I have nowhere to be but here. Yes, sir.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Josh Subcheck. I'm one of Micah's friends, and just kind of wanted to piggyback off of what he was saying. And I'm Gen Z, so I'm going to read from my phone. But now that we've kind of heard some information about shark fishing from a personal lens by an individual who has been doing it accident-free for going on a decade, I just wanted to briefly touch on some statistics about sharks here in our state. So according to the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, there are approximately 38 species of sharks that live in our local waters. Beachgoers are most likely to encounter a smaller number of species, with around 14 being common near the shore, particularly in the summer months. Some of these more frequently spotted sharks include blacktips, fine-toothed sharks, bonnethead sharks, and the Atlantic sharp-nosed shark. Out of these, blacktips are the largest of these species, with the average size being reported at 4.9 feet long and weighing about 40 pounds. The reason these sharks are commonly seen along our beaches during the summer months is because they follow the schools of bait fish to feed on that live near the shore, such as mullet and menhaden. While it is extremely rare for a shark to accidentally mistake a human for prey, it does happen on occasion. According to Greenville Online, there are about 4 shark bites per year in the state of South Carolina. I think it's also worth noting that out of the millions of people who annually visit our South Carolina beaches, a lot of the most recent shark bites have occurred in areas where shark fishing has been banned for years. The 2 most recent that I'm sure a lot of us have heard about took place on Hilton Head Island, where shark fishing has been banned for some time now. While this is sad and very unfortunate, it's good to know that neither of these bites were fatal. In fact, there has not been a single shark bite that ended someone's life in South Carolina since the 1840s, nearly 200 years ago. This is a streak that people like Mike and I hope continues for the rest of time. We both take great pride and responsibility in our love of fishing on the beach, and we're constantly policing ourselves to ensure that we're doing it in a safe and responsible way, both for ourselves and for others on the beach. While we strongly feel that an all-out ban of shark fishing from the beach is not the appropriate solution, like Micah talked about, we are in agreement that practices such as using drones, chumming, offering commercial shark fishing charters, and fishing during what we call peak people hours, i.e. 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. during busy summer months is irresponsible and should be avoided in order to ensure everyone's safety on the beach. We sincerely hope to find a common ground solution to this topic that results in everyone being safe, happy, and able to continue enjoying the beautiful beaches that God has blessed us with here in Charleston. I just want to say thank you all for your time and for allowing Mike and I to speak this morning.
That's all,
Thank you.
Chairman.
Is it okay? I didn't sign up, but I would like to speak. That's all.
Sure, I don't have a problem.
Oh.
You get-
And apologies for not signing up in advance.
Mhm.
And thank you for your time. I'm here to voice support for the ordinances around hate crimes and preventing them. I want to thank Carol Rice for her leadership on this and point out that Carol has a great history as a council member, and also, not everybody knows that she served as mayor for almost a year when filling in when she was mayor pro tem. So otherwise, I obviously we have a climate and right now that has brought this conversation up nationally with anti-Semitism and other incidents of people being targeted for being different and coming from different cultures and races and ethnicities and all those kinds of things. So I think it's very relevant now, but also good to note the history. Not only the fact that Charleston is well known for being a gateway of many of the slaves that came to our country back in colonial times, but also that the Isle of Palms actually, as it was developed in the 40s and 50s, was developed to be an all-white community. And that is evidenced in even the deeds of that time period where homes were not allowed to be sold to anybody but people who were Caucasian. The Isle of Palms beach until the 60s was an all-white beach. And so there is a history there of a community that had many wonderful things happening, but was also had exclusions for people based on their race. It was a sundown community based on my conversations with people who lived here during that time, where people who were African American were allowed to be here during the daytime to work, but were asked to leave after sundown, and were not allowed to be residents of the community. So I just think that is, we have evolved, obviously, to be a better community, but passing an ordinance like this would also send that signal that we are a welcoming and safe place for everyone to be, and also give a tool to our public safety people to make sure that that is the case. So, thank you.
All right. The next item on the agenda is approval of the previous meeting minutes. The meeting from June 3rd, 2025 is in the packet.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any changes or recommendations?
None.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We have a very busy agenda here, so we'll try to keep it crisp and move through it the best we can. I think Douglas had asked that we have Stantec here, who's further down on the agenda, and I think they have some things to move on to. So, as a point of order, I'd like to change the order of the agenda and allow Stantec to go currently.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we'll entertain that and then get back to the regular order of the agenda.
So-
Do you want to?
Yeah, let me just,
preface this?
just kind of a quick
Yeah.
introduction. As you will recall, at our last meeting, we talked about the horrific traffic. I think it was Memorial Day weekend. We talked about options that the city, could look towards to hopefully give some improvement to the exodus traffic in the afternoons. I reached out to a couple of traffic engineers, and I've been in contact with Stuart Day with Stantec. Stantec is the firm that has, they created the city's parking management plan. They've been kind of working with us for probably over a decade on various traffic issues and studies that we've done over the years. So Stuart had some ideas really specifically about studying the gridlock that's happening in the afternoons, trying to leave. I thought it was interesting, kind of their thoughts on how they might approach looking into that issue with drones at certain times and documenting the build of traffic. But I think since we have talked, there's been kind of a broadening of their scope that the city may want to look at or consider, and not just looking at gridlock, but looking at kind of all facets of traffic management as it leaves. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to have Stuart here, talk about what they've seen in other communities, and probably more than anything, just answer questions from the group. So Stuart, if you don't mind, if you'd come to the, and you can actually,
You can come here.
yeah, maybe just sit here, Stuart, and we'll,
Yeah.
Probably.
and if you don't mind, why don't you start with what we discussed, and I don't know that this is a path forward, but we'll let the group discuss it about, kind of watching the build of traffic through the drones and how that would work.
Yeah, and just for the group's awareness, as Douglas mentioned, we have been working on this island for a while, live in the community, not on the island, but, visit the beach with my family, and also I've seen firsthand some of the challenges. But also we do traffic work throughout the state, just for your awareness, and we do special event observations, observing traffic, both for other beach communities as well as special events like Clemson football and so on and so forth. So we have a kind of, this is within our wheelhouse of efforts. So what Douglas explained to me, and I was not here on Memorial Day, but it sounded as if, the congestion really built sort of east of the connector and then had trouble egressing the island, which really caused almost a gridlock situation on the remainder of the island. Looking at that, what Douglas and I had talked about is potentially looking at maybe like a July 5th, not the 4th because of the fireworks create a unique condition when people leave the beach, but some other major sort of beach weekend and observing the traffic. What we've experienced is when you do observations during a special event, if you don't have a good way to kind of get around and see multiple things happening all at once, sometimes you get bogged down and stuck in the traffic, and then, you kind of lose the value. So what I had talked with Douglas about is what we've done on a few projects recently is there's someone we contract with that flies a drone and can take aerial imagery every hour, or sometimes depending on the area and the massing, they can do it in smaller increments, but then you can kind of get larger data sets of real life occurrences, and then we could identify the particular instance where the traffic really was building. And then from that data, then we could kind of identify what potential improvements could be done in order to alleviate those problems. Does that make sense, Douglas? Is that?
Yeah, that's kind of how we discussed. I think at the council meeting, and I guess Jan, you and I have talked about, whether the objective of this would be to really study gridlock specifically, because I think that's kind of what we had talked about. Maybe it's broader than that. So I guess we'd want feedback from this group is what the objective of their work would be. Would it be just general traffic flow? Would it be studying gridlock? I think depending on that might shape the work that a consultant would do for the city.
Well, first of all, I'll just say that I do feel, and I was talking to another council member about this, the mayor actually and I were talking somewhat about it, but there is more significant traffic backups this year than there was last year. And I don't know if that's because of weather or whatever, but this is recurring almost to where we were a couple years ago, and then it started to alleviate itself for a couple of years, and now I think we're back in a position that's almost untenable for a lot of people. When it takes 2.5, 3 hours to get off the island, you're trapped. And so I think the intent was, okay, this is getting bad. Let's try to do something without totally thinking through it. So I appreciate you being here. But my question is when you do these drones, we're going to see things back up and it stops. It gets gridlock. Mm-hmm. But more importantly to me is, do you already know the answer that you're trying to validate through a drone on what we can do? Do you have suggestions on, you talk about Clemson football. Mm-hmm. To me, it's, we know certain days it's going to be really bad on traffic, most weekends, right? We know 4th and 5th of July. Can't we treat this like a Clemson football game? And we don't have the resources, the chief doesn't have the resources to do that, but can't we on certain days bring resources in to just keep things moving the best we can, realizing it's not going to be like it is in December trying to get off the island, but it shouldn't take 2.5 hours, and we should be able to keep things moving like they do exiting a game or a concert or some big event like that. But my question is, that plus, is there anything else we can do without, waiting for the results of a drone study or something to come in?
I mean, I guess, so the difference between sort of what the conditions you have on a beach weekend is you have the infrastructure in place that's in place year-round. Mm-hmm. And the difference with like a special event, like a football game, is they bring in additional cones and mm-hmm. Barrels and things like that to create additional lanes out. If that's something that is required, you could do that with the infrastructure that's there today, but that is a large manpower exercise as well as a cost. And so, I think there would be potential opportunities to get additional capacity off the island, but it would be very challenging from a cost standpoint.
Yeah, that's interesting what you said, because there is a bike pedaling on both sides of the connector now. Have you ever worked with DOT to let that be used temporarily for traffic?
We've done work with DOT in terms of temporary traffic control. We could, again, I don't want to do anything on y'all's behalf without y'all directing us to, but if you are inclined to say, is that even an opportunity, we could certainly reach out to the DOT and gather their thoughts on.
So that would be a possibility. I see it as a both-and situation. What I was sort of promoting is that the one thing we can do is maybe control how long gridlock lasts by not letting it happen, putting it off for as long as we can. And I see one thing we can do is for you to look at this intersection of 14th Avenue and Palm Boulevard and see, Chief has done some wonderful things there on his own, with his staff in increasing capacity, but I think there are a couple more that we could implement, particularly since, as you said, the east end of the island is where the backup really occurs the most. And so reallocating signal time, but also the way traffic control is done by our force to possibly relieve that bottleneck a little bit sooner, but explain how it works with the rest of what's going on here on the island. It can't just be done by standing on.
Right, and that's one of the things we worked with for Clemson football, is we worked with the Highway Patrol that operated the intersections and created diagrams of how they could operate the intersection more efficiently with reducing some of those conflicting movements, thereby giving more quote-unquote green time, even though it's not under signal control, to increase capacity.
And then I think you could possibly look at the Forest Trails community and see which ways we could use suggestions for how to keep traffic from maybe cutting through that neighborhood. I think that would be something we've never looked at before. That might be a possibility. And how we can meter that traffic from there, maybe with what you've seen at Clemson might help that. So that would definitely be something that's just for these weekends. But the traffic data shows that traffic is increasing on the island. I don't know how we can accommodate any more, but it is. You can go on the SCDOT website and pull up the volumes from as many years back as you want, for at least 10 years or something, and see that it's growing. And we're getting traffic volumes on our weekends that are reaching 30,000 vehicles a day, which is just enormous for a two-lane road. So I think there's a lot with your professional expertise that we would benefit from. It's not going to make the problem go away completely, but it should be able to help. And if we could temporarily use those, I've never thought about that before, use that pedestrian bike lane for a second lane of traffic on these peak weekends. It might convince Mount Pleasant that it wouldn't be a bad idea for them to agree to it. One of the problems we have now is that part of the connector is controlled by, the other end of the connector is controlled by Mount Pleasant. So they have to agree to any kind of changes in striking or whatever that we do on the connector. So any help you could do there as well, I think would be appreciated.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Weighing in on this, I think we're here primarily today to see what we can do to influence the behavior so that we can eliminate some gridlock on certain of these weekends that we've had where we've experienced the tie-up of traffic. A couple of things I'd note is that, last year, when we compare traffic this year so far with last year, you got rainy weekends versus not so rainy weekends. Last year, we had a number of rainy weekends that really depressed traffic. What you see outside, if this happens on July the 4th or July the 5th, it's going to make a big difference in traffic. We don't know. We don't have that crystal ball. Even the meteorologists can't really tell us. But so that's something we're going to always have to deal with. We have the population increase on the mainland, which is bringing more day trippers over, let's face it. If you look at a typical Saturday changeover day out here, there seems to be less people actually on the beach and a lot more cars. That just tells us that between the check-in and check-out of the weekly rentals and the amount of people that are coming over just for the day, that's where our issues really lie, is what can we do to make that flow much more effectively. I know we have the data, the traffic counts, we have the 511 app that can give us the history of how the traffic backs up from 41st down to 21st and all up and down the avenues. Mark brought it up. I mean, he lives right there on 30th, I think, and it's a racetrack. We've all been there, and he's not the only place that it's a racetrack. So I think what we should be looking at as a committee is asking Stewart and Stantec to give us their best thoughts as to what we can do under our control, in their opinion, to help alleviate some of the traffic lockdown on these weekend days, and then go to full council once we get some of that data and maybe lobby for an even more in-depth study to see if there's something we can do in collaboration with Mount Pleasant, Sullivan's Island, SCDOT, to make it a more long-term solution.
Would you need to have any peak hour traffic volumes for any of the work that you see ahead of you?
What I would probably propose is looking at that count station data, especially the IOP connector data on when traffic is really arriving in the morning on a Saturday and when it really kind of peaks, and then it stays pretty consistent looking at the data. I don't recall the exact hours, but I'd want to probably count the main intersection right here during that AM peak and then some period in the afternoon peak to have that baseline data, and then we also come out on what we would all deem as like a busy weekend and do some sort of visual observations ourselves to make sure we see this intersection. The thought when I had submitted the drone was more getting that macro level view and kind of doing it throughout the day to see when that breakdown happens, where does it happen specifically, and then we target that for a potential improvement project. But without having that data set and really knowing where it happens and when, it's hard to identify what the improvement needs to be.
Let me clarify when I said peak hour. Traffic starts climbing at about 9 o'clock in the morning. And the peak hour is the last hour of the morning because there is no more morning.
Right.
And so the highest time, and it stays about the same from about noon until about 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
The highest volume, and then tapers off.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the data, I remember it building pretty strongly about 9 o'clock and it maintains till about 11:30, has a little dip right before lunch and then remains consistent, but.
Yeah, not anymore. I mean, it's just pretty much straight across now, so.
On the way out or on the way in?
Well, it's.
Bidirectional.
It's almost,
Kind of is obviously, the peak you're talking about is coming in, correct? And what we're talking about is studying the peak going out, correct?
well, the volumes are, after about noon, it's about, I don't know what it is exactly, but it's more evenly divided on both sides. That's how we get this many cars onto the island, on and off, is by having it's almost equal on both directions.
But the
Part
gridlock
of the day.
here is happening in kind of early afternoon on the Exodus, correct?
Yes.
So I think, I mean, from my standpoint, that's
Yeah.
Yeah,
the phenomenon we're talking
I
about.
guess to get to
studying.
Councilman Streetman's point, though, that we want some kind of suggestions on actions that we can take. And to my question to you is, which I agree, I want solutions. What do you need in order to provide council with a list of solutions that they can implement to alleviate the traffic? I mean, we're telling you to go out and do a study, right? But I don't want a study. I want solutions from you. If this is what we can do.
Right, and
So we shouldn't be telling you what you need in order to give us those solutions. We just want the solutions. So my question is, what do you need in order to provide that to us?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we would, in our study, we would make recommendations for improvements that we think would be beneficial. So we would do all that, but I do think we would do at least the traffic counts at the intersection. To your point, we would look at the data It's definitely not the traditional peak hour counts that if you're doing on the mainland, when school's in session type of thing. But we would do that, and depending on what the scale is, if the primary concern is this intersection here, we could probably do the counts and the observations and then make recommendations. If the concern is sort of the gridlock, we'd probably want the bigger data set to look at things a little differently, if that makes sense, because I know those things go hand in hand, but it depends which problem we're trying to solve on what data I'd want to collect.
I would also just add that we presented a number really to just have the drones capture images. There was so we kind of felt as though time was of the essence. If we wanted to do something while it's busy, it's clearly busy right now, so we were thinking we would collect the information now and then, come back obviously and study it. But to their point, is that a critical part of the puzzle to do it like right now while it's busy? We probably have 3 or 4 more really busy weekends.
Mm-hmm.
Should we develop a scope that is kind of the urgent to do now, and then a follow-on part of the scope that is, once you've collected that information, then time is a little bit less critical in terms of creating these longer-term solutions. So would it be a two-phase scope?
I would think so, is we could do the data collection and potentially observations, make recommendations that, thinking it's July 1 today, so it's probably not, you might be able to implement some of the suggested changes at the intersection in August. That'd be very accelerated. But then you'd be really looking at other plans for next summer.
Is it safe to fly a drone at 4 p.m. on Saturday afternoon during a thunderstorm?
No.
We would not fly the drone during.
I'm being facetious.
Yeah, but
really,
we had actually talked with the drone people. We would kind of give them the go-ahead only if we think that there's going to be good weather. We wouldn't want to do it, because again, beach traffic,
Right.
if it's like today, it's probably not going to be as much of a problem on as a 90-degree day, sunny.
Yeah. Well, most of us in this room, as I look around, are longtime residents, so we've been here a long time, and we know the patterns and what happens. To Jan's point, traffic is steadily building coming in on the weekend. We have it over, 9 to noon, that is steadily coming in and building. You can see it on the 511 app. But we also know, as longtime residents, that at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody wants to leave at once.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trickling out like it's trickling in. Everybody wants to leave at the same time. I know that on a Saturday morning, I live on 44th, I can get to the post office. But at 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, I better not try to do that.
Right.
Because you can't get through this intersection.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the pinch point, and the chief could reinforce it. We know it's on that end of the island, everybody trying to get off. So that's where we really need to concentrate our efforts.
Do you all feel like it seems like at the last meeting, we talked about it also being part of the merge at the S-curve? So Stuart was referencing studying the intersection. Would we also need to study what's happening at the S-curve? Is that the?
Seems to me we got to study everything from the Wild Dunes Gate
Yeah.
to the S-curve, yes.
Because Chief even mentioned it's a ball backing up in the
Right.
neighborhoods, and everybody's
Yeah.
then trying to get back onto one road. So you have to study that whole phenomena of how you keep traffic moving, and because and I think through the public comments have said it is a dangerous situation because people are racing through those side streets trying to see if they can't get 10 cars ahead of somebody else, and it's like a speedway out there. And then I think the public comments always say, then you get people in wine, and they're getting out and urinating in bushes and throwing trash out. And, it's a bad situation when it backs up for the residential neighborhoods back there. And so that's a separate, if we solve and keep the traffic, that's going to help that, but there may be some other things we can do as well. I'll leave that to Chief. But I do think that you have to study it all the way from the connector all the way back to Wild Dunes and
So
see
kind of
what's happening.
41st, that intersection to
Yep.
the bottom of the connector.
Exactly,
Part of the solution is going to affect the other end of the island.
yeah.
Because if we've got 2-hour delays getting from your house to the connector and no delays for Scott Pierce to get over, then you can do some things at that main intersection. So it might increase delays on one end of the island by decreasing delays on the other. So
Sharing the pain a little bit.
You solve one problem, you might push it someplace.
That's right.
So I guess we need to decide what we're asking for here and what we want to see.
To your point, though, about studying from the connector over towards Wild Dunes, we had scoped for the drone study to collect the images at the connector all the way back, I think, maybe to about 25th. Is that about what we said, Douglas? I don't remember. But we didn't, we figured by 25th, we would see the problem developing, essentially at the S-curve, like where's traffic generally coming, where does it hit, and then from that, it's really just building.
I would go further down. I think 25th, you're.
Maybe 41st. I mean, I guess 41st, there is kind of,
Yeah.
Well, you
Part of the people go right.
have no parking between 40th and 41st. It's not on either side
Yeah.
of Palm Boulevard, but at least to 39th or
That's what-
40th Avenue.
Okay.
It's somewhere in the 30s for sure.
Yeah,
You need to go
yeah.
to that, down to the high 30s.
Okay.
But,
That's another-
and maybe an approach here is to say what you would need in terms of data and what the cost would be of that. And then the second phase of it, okay, once we get the data, we're gonna turn this in solutions and maybe, you know,
Right.
that cost would be.
Okay.
And some timing around that we can then bring back to council to offer a suggestion, because, you know, last time we went, we just said, okay, we're gonna do a drone study, and I think there was a lot of, oh, we don't need a drone study, we know traffic builds up, you know, so
Yeah.
there's needed to be a little bit more thought, I think, around, okay, if we get this, then what?
Right, and I think what Douglas and I had discussed was, due to the interest of time and
Yeah.
we were thinking we'd potentially do the drone collection
Yeah.
on the 5th, just because it's a Saturday, probably a peak
Yeah.
season weekend. And then we would figure out what does it mean after that,
Yeah.
but we were
I
trying to
agree,
get
and
it
I think there
in
was a
this
sense of
season.
urgency at that time, let's get something, but, right, I think if you could come back with a more comprehensive plan that I
Okay.
think that we should bring to workshop here in, next week, if you could, I don't know how long it'd take you to put something together, but,
I mean, we can work on putting together a full scope that includes the recommendations as well.
yeah, I think that's really what we need. I mean, it's senseless for us to do a drone study without then, relying on your expertise to get us solutions, because that's what we're interested
Yeah.
in.
Right.
So I think if you put together that whole package and realizing that it's Tuesday is the workshop meeting that we'd like to take that to, I think that's probably that's what I see as the next step in this, unless you guys see it differently.
I agree, Chair.
I'd like to add one little thing to it,
Mhm.
hopefully, and we might even put them separately, so if you decide you don't want it, that's fine. A peak, a hourly count, but I think you can do now, through the cameras and whatnot, so you don't have to have people on the ground doing the counts during the.
Yeah, I mean, we would-
I guess the peak hour, the highest hour.
We wouldn't probably use like the DOT 511 cameras but we would have someone come out and they would actually install a camera on a pole, and that's how they would do their traffic counts. They wouldn't have the human being at the intersection
Correct, yeah.
during the peak hour, correct?
And if we did it at the same time as the drone was happening, then I think we would have some good data. I'm concerned that once you reach gridlock, the data's no good.
That's right.
So if we have it building up to the gridlock, then we can probably isolate enough volumes, traffic volumes, where you would have that to work with too. Because some of the changes, some of the recommendations may require that we do some signal timing changes at the intersection. The good news is this intersection is South Carolina DOT, but it's under our control, and we have already gotten word I think Desiree got an agreement with them that said if we do a study, a retiming proposal for here, they would implement it for us. So that we already have that sort of if those people are still around who made that agreement, who made that statement to them.
Do you think that's a
Yeah, I was gonna ask Chief.
probable?
I know I talked with Josh myself about it, and he basically said we would need to study. He didn't necessarily say they would do it, but they've been good partners for us in the past when we've been able to come to them with data, so I would imagine they would take what we give them and do something with it.
Yeah, if it's a reliable traffic engineer.
But Chief, do you agree with that kind of plan of action that we're talking about as well? Like get a comprehensive plan of data collection, solutions, cost of it, and then we go back?
Absolutely, yes, sir. And I think you guys were right on the money with how far to go back. When I came through Memorial Day weekend, the traffic, I came through 41st just fine.
Yeah.
It was when I got to around 35th, 36th
Yeah.
that I came to my dead stop. But my perception was that the majority of that is close to the S-curve, 22nd, 22nd through 19th probably is where everybody's racing to get into the Palm Boulevard, so. But yes, if you went down the 30th or 35th, I think you definitely are going to, you'll be past the root cause and be able to see what it
And if
is.
you're on Waterway, you're going to come to a dead stop around 28th or 29th
Yes, sir.
Avenue also. And then the people are going to be cutting up, trying to get to Palm,
Correct, yes, sir.
clogging the avenues.
Yep.
Any concern that if this goes through the processes I think we're talking about, probably doesn't have them collecting information until mid-August, kind of at the earliest? Are we getting borderline too late if we were to go that route?
I think our history has been, once we hit 4th of July, we do tend to start see a decrease in people coming to the beach. Now, this summer's been different, so that
It's
could
even worse.
be different this summer, but in the past, it's still busy, but it's not as busy as it was before the 4th of July. It's kind of the experience I've seen. Still busy, just not as busy.
Yeah, we may, hopefully, I don't know. We didn't see gridlock this past weekend, did we? Did you see it?
I think we did. It was not for the same length of time that we had in the past, but we did see some for sure.
Okay.
Saturday afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Because,
But Douglas, to your point though, I mean, the timing is, it'd be nice to do it in July, but I don't think we have approval to do anything in July, so I don't know how we'd go about doing it. We need to bring this to council to get approval. First, we got to get the plan, then we have a discussion, we got to bring it to council for a full vote, and I don't know of another way to do it other than the end of July meeting, right?
well, you could look at last year's volumes for the month of August, July and August, and just see.
In terms of the ADTs, I mean, we could look at that,
Yeah,
but
just to see if you think it'd be, high enough for us to consider anything over about
I
25,000.
don't think this warrants a special meeting.
No.
No.
And so we're going to have to wait till the end of the month to do it, and then we'll have to make a decision whether we feel like there's a weekend in August. If it prolongs, then more than a normal year, and if there's a weekend, if
Yeah.
not, then we're forced to
So do we have?
wait.
Well, if that's the.
Unfortunately, we've kind of missed the window, but,
Do
yeah.
we have permission to do the drone work now? Or not?
No.
No.
No, no.
I will say August is a drastic decrease.
Yeah.
School starts, for most of them, it's around the 6th.
Yeah.
So we tend to see a drastic decrease in visitors.
So, but we can tee this up for next year, if not this year, because we missed last year because we don't start the discussion until traffic is.
Yeah, if we don't begin somewhere, we'll just miss it again next year.
Right.
So, I mean, you may as well gather information, with the knowledge that you have and the history that you can get, and at least get some kind of recommendations that we could look at, not only in the committee, but in council, to say, okay, knowing that this season probably is going to be on the wane after next week, what can we do now to start planning for next season by Easter time
Yeah, I think
or
that's
Memorial Day?
probably right.
Yeah, maybe Stuart and I talk about just if there's anything that we could do, but, in the next 2-3 weeks while it is really, really busy to just capture imagery. I mean, if there's cameras or if there's just something that can be done to avoid kind of losing the year, we'll talk about that, see if there's something we can just do. But otherwise, if you could have something for the workshop, which is next Tuesday.
Well, maybe,
Tuesday.
yeah, could we vote on it for the workshop, in the workshop?
Can't vote in the workshop.
Can we convene right after?
It's up to the mayor if
Do
you
we
wanted to
have-
call
that-
a special meeting.
Just to approve it? I don't know. I mean, Mayor thought we were rushing it before, so I don't know
Yeah.
if he'd be agreeing.
We'll
All right.
at least have it ready, and we
Yeah.
can,
Right.
we can make
Okay.
that decision later.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you,
Thank you.
Stuart,
All
for
right.
coming.
Thank you.
If we get back to the order of the agenda, we're in old business. The first item is discussion of shark fishing ordinance and guidelines. There's a recommendation on an ordinance in the packet. I guess I've got a few comments, but I'll open it up to anybody else that wants to talk first on it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and open it up real quickly. It seems to me that what we were presented here with the sample ordinance that Douglas and the team put together, along with the Isle of Palms fishing guidelines and etiquette that, you brought forward, that was something that Seabrook Island had done, that sort of tied into their ordinance. I mean, this really covers, I think, the spirit of what I would be looking for, in that we, from a surf fishing standpoint, to Michael's point and Scott and those, I mean, it's a privilege to be able to surf fish out here, and I don't see us regulating surf fishing to the point that says, okay, we don't allow surf fishing. I think Georgetown County tried to go that way, and now they're rethinking it already.
Right.
For me, it's always been about chumming, attracting sharks into an area where we have swimmers, kayakers, et cetera, and the apparent safety problems we might have in that regard. And if we put something as a city in place that says, we're not going to have commercial shark fishing, in our waters, blatantly attracting shark, and we're going to have a series of guidelines and etiquette we put in place so that, surf fishers, swimmers, all respect each other. That's it. That's the epitome for me.
And I agree. There are a couple things I see I'd
Sure.
like to kind of comment on in the way it's written, though. I think the intent is not to outlaw recreational fishing, but to outlaw commercial fishing, chumming, and all those things that people feel like do attract sharks. But in the second whereas on this thing, it says, whereas the intentional fishing, catching, or attempting to catch sharks from the beach or shore endangers the public and poses a hazard to humans. I don't know if that's correct or not. At most, I'd like to see whereas intentional fishing or catching of sharks from the beach or shore can endanger the public and can impose a hazard to humans. I mean, if you're doing it the wrong, if you're chumming and doing different things, it can.
Can or
But I don't
could.
think that the normal fishing of recreational fishing really, and I think I appreciate the public comments. I think one of the important things to realize is the sharks are out there right now, and they're feeding on bait fish, okay? And that's why they're there, and that's why people come and fish. But when you throw bait out, if you're not chumming and trying to draw fish in, you throw bait out, you can catch a lot of things on the bait. The shark eat the same thing as what, redfish or other things eat. And so this gets me to the next point, and I bring it to you, Chief. I said this last time, and where we're putting into the ordinance on 7-3-23A, and it says, it shall be unlawful for any person to intentionally attempt to catch or take any shark or other marine animal that endangers the public from any fishing pier, beach, or above. That's great, we say that. And then later in E, we say, nothing in this section shall affect or prohibit the baiting of crab traps or the placement of natural bait on a hook or line. So you put natural bait you're throwing out there, but yet we say here, it's unlawful for any person to attempt catch, and I don't know what take means. Does that mean take off the beach? But I don't know how, unless somebody, you go up to somebody and say, are you fishing for shark? And they say yes, then you say, oh, well, you're violating the law. But if they're fishing with bait, we're saying it's legal in one spot, but it's illegal on a certain species with another. So you can't dictate what bait, fish bites your bait. I just don't know how you enforce it.
And that was the discussion the last time, was
Yeah.
it's, if the intent is to say you can't, that we don't want them shark fishing, then if I go up to somebody and they're not chumming and they're not doing anything else, and they say, yes, I'm shark fishing, if we want to say they can shark fish, then we say they can shark fish. But I think if we don't want them to fish for shark, we have to say we don't want them to fish for shark.
I think we want them to be able to recreational fish on the beach.
For shark,
Whatever
Is
they
a-
catch,
I think-
and I think what we don't want, I think, is what Councilman Streetman said, is that we don't want chumming. We don't want drones going out. We don't want commercial shark fishing operations on the beach. We don't want things that naturally would draw, shark into a feeding frenzy by chumming. That's obviously something that I think is in here and we'd want to stay. But to say that we don't, I think it's a step too far, and I don't think we're there to say we don't want recreational fishing. And when you allow recreational fishing, you may catch a shark.
But you're not intentionally, that's the
Right.
difference, is it intentional? I suck at fishing, and I've only caught like 5, and one of them happened to be a black-tip shark.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
But I was not intentionally trying to catch that. That would be the difference. And when the issue was brought to us, it was geared towards the group that was intentionally fishing.
But why wouldn't we? My question is, why would we want to stop somebody from fishing for shark if you fish for shark the same way you fish for any other fish?
It's really up to y'all.
No, I'm just asking the question in general. Why would we want, if people want to come and fish on the beach and they want to fish for shark, because shark are out there, why would we want to prevent them from fishing for shark when they fish for shark the same way they fish for any other fish?
I think that, to me, the key distinction that you're making is if you're doing it exactly like you would
Yeah.
fish for anything else. From my perspective, it is at least alluded to that you are drawing the shark in to places where there are swimmers. But I think if what you're saying is you're doing it just like you would catch any other fish, there's not a specific unique bait or method that draws sharks in any more than they would already be drawn in, I think that's the difference.
Chumming does, and we don't want that.
And I don't know enough about it to know if the bait that you use when you're not chumming is specifically drawing shark into closer to the shore where there are fish, where there are people. I don't know, but I think what you're saying is if you're fishing the same way you would fish for any other fish, I think that's probably an acceptable practice. But it's when you are, and we talked about this last month, and I had it in my mind from last month that people were not intentionally fishing for shark, but I think the public comments today are different.
Yeah.
That we are very much intentionally fishing for shark, but it sounds like all of the standards that are in the draft would be agreeable, with the exception of A that you've pointed out, where it just says if you're intentionally fishing for shark, that's a problem. So it almost sounds as though you could strike A, and it would appease those that have made comments today and still achieve the majority of what I think was found objectionable.
And I do like the fact that we put G in here, though, because G then says, it gives the freedom to a beach service officer or code enforcement officer that if they feel like a fisherman is endangering anybody, that they can say, hey, we need you to stop fishing now or move. And so it allows the freedom of an officer to use their judgment whether they're imposing danger on swimmers and beachgoers and others, and if they are, they're asking them to move and stop fishing. And I think that's an important thing because I'm more worried.
I'm sorry? I think so. Yes, ma'am. I wrote it.
Yeah.
Chair, if I could weigh in, I mean, A may be redundant. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that particular paragraph or section being removed. I do think intentionally is the key word there. With natural bait, and these guys are the experts, but we've all surf fished it from time to time, squid, shrimp, maybe minnow, whatever. You throw that line out there as a novice like me, you don't know what you're going to come up with. I've caught small shark before, sand shark or whatever, and you just take the thing, get it off this line and get it back out there. So it's intentional is the key word, and I think we covered in the rest of the ordinance by saying, by having baiting methods such as chumming and dragging bait out beyond the break line or whatever in the surf, and then attracting shark, like commercial shark fishermen do, would be the issue. I thought the presentation they made was great, and I thought that the organization they represent, whether hobbyists or, I don't know if it's a formal, yeah, but, I mean, they have some really good rules they've imposed upon themselves.
Yeah.
By saying, okay, between May and the end of the summer, we just don't surf fish because we know there's going to be a lot of people there. That's the kind of common courtesy we're looking for.
Right.
But we also want to make sure we don't have an issue or a situation in place where we're encouraging people to chum and intentionally attract that sort of fish.
I think one of our jobs as council people is to sort of make sure there's 95% of the people out there want to do it the right way, but there's always somebody, like this commercial fisherman that showed up on the beach. It's just, so how do we make sure that that doesn't happen again? And I think one thing is we could say there's no commercial shark fishing off of the beach.
That's already part of the code. You can't, he was
Right.
stopped from the commercial aspect.
Yeah. So that stopped that. And the second one is, I don't know whether we need to memorialize this or not, but do we have to say in our ordinance at this time that there's no shark fishing during the hours of whatever the shark fishermen use now? Your same regulations that you have. I don't know that we have to memorialize that yet. It's sort of.
If we do that, we're basically saying you can't surf fish during these hours.
Yeah, which,
To me, I don't want to do that.
I think we're protected by this with language that the
Right.
chief put in. So if
Exactly.
it's dangerous and they deem it as dangerous, they can stop it. And I
Yeah.
think that's what you were missing
Right.
before, and
Yes,
now
sir.
you've got that correct.
And it's in there. And I think, to go to your point, a lot of times, as we kind of heard from the presentation earlier, the groups will kind of police themselves too when somebody steps out, for the most part, those that are doing this on a consistent basis. So I think that would typically, that's kind of what it sounds like, solve part of the issue already.
I just see that A as being something that's non-enforceable, and if I'm a person that's out there fishing, you come up to me and say, are you, knowing that that's going to be in there, and you say, are you intentionally fishing? Nope, I'm just fishing. Whatever I catch, I catch. And that's what I'm going to say, and then, okay, so that's why I
Right.
just think it's like bad, it's bad policy. It's non-enforceable.
Yeah, I think what it came down to was whether council wanted to take the stance of no shark fishing, or it's okay to shark fish, just not in these capacities.
Yeah.
And so I think taking A meets where everybody's at, and you can, as long as you are not doing it with a drone or a unmanned aerial vehicle or
And
chumming.
if there's any other thing specific to shark fishing we want to put in here that attract sharks in, I'm fine with it, but I just don't think that's good.
Let's
policy.
ask these gentlemen here if one of them would
Yeah.
like to approach the
Well, I mean, part
microphone.
of the reason why
Come
we're
up here,
talking
please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
is the situation, we're talking about with having to come up and be like, well, I'm not fishing for this. I don't want to be dishonest. That's why I just was forthright with saying that this is really two different issues. You have surf fishing and you have land-based shark fishing. They're similar, but the land-based shark fishing is kind of geared with y'all saw with the bigger gear, with bigger natural bait. There's no drawing in because the baits are actually put way further out and not in so there's not an attraction besides the normal attraction you're trying to attract the fish with your bait. But there's no additive attraction or anything like that makes it unfair or unsporting. So that's why I just wanted to be forthright. So if, you know, they come up and there's rules and be like, well, from May 15th to September 15th, you can only shark fish, you cannot shark fish from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. here. You know, no, you know, weekends, like we're not gonna fish this weekend. It's just not appropriate, and we don't want people who have limited knowledge to be uncomfortable when you do reel in a shark, you know, and we don't wanna reel it by people swimming. That's why we wait till 6 or 7 in the evening, till swimmers are gone. People know it's not safe to swim in the twilight or dusk or dawn. That's when fish become the most active. And so we do self-police ourselves, as you said, and implement things to not screw it up. And then, as you referenced, one idiot screws it up for everyone because they just do what they want and they freelance. And I make it my business to keep up. I'm very plugged in. I know the people in Beaufort you're talking about. I know all the groups. I know all the charters. I've been doing it for years, and you know, I just, it's kind of like a little secret society is what it's supposed to be, so that it doesn't upset people, because not everyone likes, you know, think, I don't like hunting, I don't like killing things, I don't kill sharks. This is all for me, for sport, for the challenge, for the physical rigor of it, for, you know, science, and it's just grown into that over time. And so we just feel like we bend over backwards to accommodate every other beachgoer, and we just want our fair time too. And just, you know, fishing is a Charleston birthright almost, you know, and it's just how far you decide to go with it should be up to you. Like, for instance, you fellas go offshore, you bottom fish. Some people want to catch mahi, but some people want to catch big sailfish. They want to catch, you know, huge things, and everyone has their different challenge level, or they get to a point, and that's just where I have gotten to the point of, you know, doing that. And it's not always about sharks. Sometimes we throw out little lines for redfish in the fall when redfish are around. We basically target what's around at the time to maximize our fishing time. You don't see me on the beach after September, October, November, December. I'm catching flounders and redfish and trout in the creek. I just love fishing. It just is an unfortunate coincidence of timing that sharks being caught from the beach is most productive during tourist time.
Yeah, but I guess we have to look at everybody, right? There's a lot of
Right.
people that come to our beach for the summer, and they go out with their kids and in the morning hours, and they throw lines out in the water and they shore fish, right? In the afternoons, I see a lot of them picking them up because it's getting too crowded. So we have to put in regulation and policy that affects everybody, but if you, me personally, I don't want to stop that. I don't want to prevent people from going out and fishing on the shore. And if it becomes unsafe, they don't stop themselves, and now you have the right to stop them.
Yes.
But at the same time, you know, you're telling me that the only difference between you and that person going out and fishing is that the gear's bigger. You know, you may have some kind of leader or something, and,
Right.
you know, different, but I don't think we can put policy and say you can, you know, what size of gear you use or anything like that to effectively police shark fishing. And I don't know, and I don't want to stop it during the summer, because that's when most of our, you know, most of the visitors come here and fish. So I guess, you know, I'm trying to get a balance that I don't want any kind of methods that attract sharks into the shore where we have people. But
Right.
yet I want people allowed the freedom to be able to fish, because, you know, they should have that right just as well as people have right to swim in the ocean. And so that's why I'm trying to figure out what the right
Well, I
balance
guess
is.
I get hung up too on the attract sharks. I don't fully understand. I mean, basically, whether I go or not, I'm not, well, exactly, something that's extreme. But if I go fishing in the methods that I fish, or I don't, those sharks are gonna be there or not be there. I don't feel like I have an effect on that, or, you know, a responsibility if a shark's in the area. Well, a shark's out there right now swimming around
Yeah.
looking for food, and I'm in here with you guys. So that's where the drawing in and stuff
Let me ask
like
you this,
that.
is there anything that people do to draw in or attract sharks that we've missed?
Not that I can think, because chumming doesn't work on a beach. The way tides and
Yeah.
it washes down the beach, it's not possible logistically to do that with very much success. No, I mean, do people fish extra rods? Like, the more rods in the water gives you the better chance as far as percentages, so that would be something that you would do to increase your chance to catch one. But as far as bait, the
Baits?
fresher the bait, like, for instance, I use fish carcasses. When you go offshore and you catch your little red snappers and your little grouper, that's what I use for bait. I cut the body that's been filleted off and I put the 4-pound head out there or whatever like that. Or I get a bonita that you would use and use chunks and I cut the bonita in half and such like that. So it's all natural bait. There is no additives or any advantage to doing it or sporting for my interest to do it in any other way.
How are you getting the bait out there?
I'm the kayak guys that you referred to there.
Take a
So
kayak
that
out.
guy fishes at 47 or to 49, and apparently someone at 49 was becoming upset with us being out there. We started having officers coming us out there informing us that we can't commercial fish. We told them we weren't. We had officers then come out and tell us that our cars had been, I guess, someone on 49 who lives there didn't like it and took measures with making complaints that the officers had to follow up on.
So that was actually on you, not the commercial
No, it
operation.
was the commercial guy, and I think they were confused because we fished the same area.
So
that's
some of the
how I knew
complaints,
about this guy. It could have been, I don't know.
Yeah.
So because we're there so often, so I think they maybe had us together.
okay.
May have been the confusion there. So to alleviate that, once again, our policing of ourselves, we moved down to 51 and 52 to not aggravate whoever's getting upset on 49. And then that's when I approached this guy, Steve, about how he's screwing it up for everyone. He's being that guy that you can't commercial fish and all this other stuff. He abruptly, after that, like 2 weeks later, moved to Florida. So he doesn't live here anymore. He's not around. But that's another thing we tried to do was someone who was on 49. I appreciate, what they've done to have a property there, and they don't want to look out and say, I get it. But that's where my argument is it's for all of us, and it's public. So we tried to move down and get away from them to de-escalate the problem that was starting to occur. So that's a little history. So, but we kayak, to answer your question. I take mine out the old school way in the kayak. That's another reason why I like the drone. It will keep amateurs and novices from going out there, can do it the easy way. When you get in that kayak and you're looking at 3 and 4 foot waves and you're going out in the dark 300-400 yards out, that's not for everybody. So that weeds out, and some of these rules will weed out a lot of potential problem causers, in my opinion.
And you're not endangering any surfers, swimmers, or?
Well, no, we come out at 5 or 6 in the evening.
Yeah.
Most of them are gone, and same thing, I went down there, and the lady's out there with her little girl surfing, and we sat there for 2 hours and let them surf. Until they got their stuff and packed up and left, and we went out. But that's just me. I realize, unfortunately, not everyone will approach it that way, and that's y'all's concern, and I get that on your job. But all I can do is,
So knowing, I guess I hear that you all are potentially talking about A and striking A to get away from intentionally fishing for shark. Would there be an appetite for adding in or watering that down by saying except in the hours that he's saying are the appropriate hours to do it?
I'm fine with that.
No.
So leave intentionally fishing for shark is illegal except in the times that they,
Yeah, you can.
They think are safe.
And I'm fine with doing that, and I think that would be the hours that he mentioned, I'm good with even, which I think said 10 to, or is it 9 to 5 or something
he
like that?
said 10 to 5, and I was just throwing out roundabout numbers just because I looked at a 24-hour period. We split the beach in half.
I would say
We get
10 to
from 6
5,
6,
May
we get from 6 to 6.
31st through September 1st.
You might want to put it before Memorial Day weekend, just to grandfather that into the holidays. are all
May
covered
1st, May
into-
1st through
Into Labor Day.
September 1st.
That covers July, all the big holidays.
And kayaking, you're going out typically 300 yards or more, right?
Yeah, I mean, the minimum closest we drop is 200 yards. So there are no surfers, there are no swimmers in that area. There's just fishing line, which we make the people aware. We have special poles that keep everything way up so that people can still walk on the thing and not hit the line and get aggravated. But yes, typically we drop our baits from 200 to 600 yards away from the shore. So if anything, we're drawing the sharks away from the shore. That's a little reach in there, but it's since we're talking that language.
So are we I think we're talking about leaving A in there, but adding, so it would read, it shall be unlawful for any person to intentionally attempt to catch or take any shark or marine animal that may endanger the public from any fishing pier during May 1st through September 1st, between the hours of 10 a.m. and 5 p.m.
Yep.
If you feel the need to not strike it completely, I think that's a fair compromise.
What if we just said, matched it to the e-bike ordinance that said between Memorial Day and Labor Day? That way,
That was
it's the
my-
same ordinance,
That's
same wording
Makes
we
it
use for that.
consistent, yeah.
Memorial
Keeps confusion down.
That's what I had on my paper, I just didn't read that much.
to Labor. And you've read the rest of this. I mean, we have.
Yes, sir.
and I don't know what a
Meeting,
trot
I've read
line
it.
is.
Trot line wouldn't apply really to this.
To
No one
anything?
uses multiple hooks or trot line.
What hours did we say?
10 to 5.
10 to 5? Okay.
And that would be a seasonal ordinance, correct? Am I correct on that? 10 to 5,
Between.
Memorial Day to Labor Day?
Yeah, it'd be Memorial Day to Labor Day,
Right.
10 to
That would
5.
flow Depending on how the holidays fall.
That's correct.
That would work
Yeah.
smoothly.
Memorial Day
okay.
weekend.
So in the winter, you could do it.
All day long.
Morning, you could do it.
Right, and then
Afternoon.
before, when the people aren't around, because, we're out there in March and April, there's no one out on the
Yeah.
beach in March and April. The water's in the 60s, no one wants to be out there, but that's crazy fools, and, that's when we do our daytime stuff. And then we adjust the schedule properly and accordingly when it becomes, the tourist time and people want to go to the beach. I have 3 kids, my kids play on the beach too, and so I get that whole and respect the right of everyone.
And did I hear you correctly? You tagged shark that you
Yes, sir.
catch?
Yes, sir. I tagged 3 out here 2 weeks ago,
Okay.
out here on this, out of the ponds.
I got a shark bracelet here. I'm tracking something.
There you go. Yeah, they're recapture
Great
tags.
white.
It's a cooperative volunteer program, and they take advantage of fishermen and their hobby to track. I've actually had 6 recaptured and caught in the last 5 years,
Douglas.
one of them
Yes.
3 times.
There's a typo.
Where is that?
C
Interesting.
area.
And that is actually a federally.
Oh, yeah.
That's my
cooperative
fault.
program, So it kind of falls.
Good information.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for coming in, I
Yeah.
appreciate
Yes,
it.
sir.
Yeah.
Thank you
I think
for,
we've got a path forward now,
got
that
it.
we're gonna bring
Yeah,
it. We're-
thank you.
The only
Thank you.
other thing, that I have is in the guidelines, there's some kind of, formatting here with one of them on 4, the top of page 11 of that, or the second page of it, the top, you see.
Oh, fisherman question
I
mark,
don't know
crabbers
what all
question
that
mark.
is.
Right.
But the other thing is in number
Oh.
8, in prohibited equipment activities, I would add drones in there. I don't see drones in there, so we should add that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And we should also add, probably in here in the guideline, that what we just said around the dates, the time and the hours as well. Or the, 10 to 5.
Yep.
Labor Day, Memorial Day.
So that would probably be
Yeah.
in 9,
That's what I'm thinking.
add the
Mhm.
times and dates.
So we train this to workshop next week and then go through the ordinance, depending on what comes out of there, the ordinance, first reading and.
End of July.
in July.
Yep.
Good.
The next item is discussion of beach inlet signage, and I think Chief Oliveris has do you have an update on that, or is that?
A brief
I know there's
update.
a
We-
picture of a sign in the packet, but.
Yes, we sent a draft over to Sullivan's Island, to their leadership to review. We're waiting to hear back from them on any feedback. And then from that point, we'll have something a little more detailed.
So just to summarize what you're trying to do, you're trying to get the same signage on the Sullivan's Island side as what is on the Isle of Palm side, the signs match and what they say.
Correct. So we're trying to establish a template that both municipalities could use that could be expanded out to a larger sign, let's say a 4-foot by 6-foot sign, to something that would also transition to a much smaller piece that could be placed on a beach access path. And we believe that the consistency in the signage, would also send that message where the public is aware, and there's not a conflict on how somebody could interpret it.
Okay. To me, the important thing is to put, like, as we said last time, we had a tough time saying where, we have a sign that says it's $1,000 fine, but where? Is it, to what point? And I assume we're saying it's dangerous, it's dangerous, if we're fining you because it's dangerous, you're gonna die if you go in there. So, but we should be, anybody walking up there, to me, should know, past that point, it's dangerous. I can't swim there, and this area I can, this area I can't. Because right now, I think people are walking, they see the sign, but they, okay, if I go down on, 50 yards, I'm okay, and they go in there, but they're not. And I just think we need to be very clear on where it's dangerous, where it's not.
Yeah, where the inlet begins, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, does it begin at the sandbar? I mean, the sandbar is dangerous in and of itself also, but, or is that a different situation that should be handled differently?
Correct.
Drove down there this morning before the meeting,
Mhm.
and there were kids out on that spit,
Mm-hmm.
way out.
Yes, so the
So the tide
imagery,
starts coming in, they get trapped out there, done. That's what, I just think we have to be, even to me, at the expense of making our beach a little bit, from an aesthetic standpoint, you don't want a bunch of signs on your beach, but I think, Sullivan Island has 2 right on there. And I think eat the point of even, putting things out on the beach so people know or clear. If we can save a life, I think we need to do it. And I think it's to a point now where I think you rescued somebody off that sandbar too, didn't you, not too long ago? There was a smaller kid out there and got trapped.
we've been there recently for, yes, we had a family of, I believe it was either 4 or 6 individuals. I think there were 4 children and 2 adults that we removed off a sandbar. And then we also had a water rescue where we had an adult male and I believe a 12-year-old male out in the water. Paddle boarder had, let them kind of hang on to their board until we got there. So it's a very busy area, especially now with the sandbar. And of course, that changes, in 5-10 years, it may look much different. But right now, we definitely have that exists.
So what do you think the timing is on getting signs and coordination and where they're going to go and kind of a plan on that?
So we're waiting to hear back from Sullivan's Island. I mean, they're in their, they had the fire department had their fish fry this past weekend, 4th of July this week as we have it. So I anticipate in the next few weeks, we'll hear something back from them on their feedback, and that'll help drive our direction.
So maybe by our next meeting, which is August the 5th, I think, or somewhere around that, we could have some plans.
Yes, sir. I think we'll have something a little more concrete template-wise for you to review, and potentially locations as well. And of course, this ordinance, ordinances, our police department has the ability to enforce those ordinances. So, Chief Cornett and I will be working on that, and then, along with Douglas and Chandra on what we can present to you to consider.
Okay. Any other?
Nope.
Any other thing? No. Next item is discussion of ordinance 2025-05, amending the trigger for business license revocation. There's an updated, this is something we took last month, the council kind of kicked back to us.
Right.
And we have an updated ordinance in the package, which does 2 things. One is it takes out the trash can violations as being a strike, if you will, or against a license, but it also takes the calendar, from a calendar year to a rolling 12-month with and this would start upon approval by council. But what we're saying is any strike against a current STR for anything prior to January 1st, 2025 would not be counted. So what it does effectively, it says that this rolling 12-month won't start until January next year, is what that really does, which I think is the fair way to do it. It says, you're not going back to last year. So that, we made that change in this ordinance. Is there any, I'll just open up for any comments and what we'd want to do
I
with
have
it.
a question on how are we enforcing the garbage rollout card issue?
And as it relates to strikes or just generically day-to-day?
Since we've taken the fact that they no longer.
No
have
longer a
strikes
strike.
against the license.
Okay.
We would enforce it the same way we do right now with warnings first and then citations. We don't have a lot that get to the,
Okay, and the citation has a fine with it?
it does, yes, ma'am. It's
It's
city
part of the
ordinance.
general fine though, right?
It is, it's the
And
general
so
fines.
It just says not exceeding $500 or not exceeding 30 days. How do you determine what the fine is for that?
Our standard practice for that is to start as low as we can, which is around 128, 122, and then we would, if we have a repeat offender, we would escalate from there. If you had somebody that was just a major non-compliant person who's received multiple tickets, the maximum amount with court costs associated could be $1,087.
So, but do we need
1,082,
to
I'm
put,
sorry.
do we need to put anything in ordinance anywhere that says about an escalating fine? Because I thought there was some support for that and saying if we're gonna take it out of, counting as a strike, that we wanted to have some consequences of increasing fine levels. Or do you automatically take care of that?
We automatically kind of do that on our own.
Sounds like they're doing that now.
Yes,
That
sir.
they're starting low and working their way up. And you really don't have that many anyway, right?
We don't. It's very minimal, the number of tickets we've issued for
Mhm.
roll cart violations.
Is there any,
All right, that would be enough to change behavior, that's all I'm just.
Yes, ma'am. The one ticket we issued, I don't believe we've had an issue at that property since then. The one I can think of off the top of my head.
is there any other?
I'm good with striking the whole roll cart violation issue and then, doing as we had proposed earlier on the 365 and taking that to council as a recommendation to consider.
Do we need to vote on that?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to make a motion on that then, Rusty?
I'll move that we adopt the ordinance as revised.
Okay.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
All right.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
That since we have people in the audience waiting to hear the discussion on the hate crime legislation, that if we're going into new business, that we move that to the top of the agenda.
Okay, you make a motion with that?
I move that.
Second?
I'm in favor. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So we'll move that up.
As a housekeeping item, probably also should have made a recommendation on the shark fishing ordinance, but we,
All right.
did you all actually make a recommendation? Did not?
Did not.
All right.
Can we do that retroactively?
I think so, yeah. Right?
We do it right now before we forget.
Yeah,
I'll
go.
put it in the minutes where it belongs, but yes, you can do that.
Okay.
All right.
What's the, anybody taking the motion?
We said, I forgot what we said.
You can say as revised,
Yeah,
further
you-
discussion.
She got
I
the
will-
revisions, I don't.
Yeah, I will make a motion to take the revised version of the shark fishing ordinance and guidelines to city council for consideration,
As
Revised
revised,
as
yeah.
discussed.
Yeah.
as discussed.
I second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are, we're going to talk about the hate crime legislation. I guess, is there any comments, Douglas, that you want to make on this?
No, I would
or
just,
do you wanna-
I guess I would just introduce the issue by saying, the city, this issue has been kind of repeatedly coming back to the city in different forms, different formats. Previously, and what's in your packet is a local ordinance that was presented a couple of years ago, a year ago, last year?
Last year. I don't think it was on the agenda to be discussed, and we developed this proposal, and then it was stricken from that agenda.
So this is the same exact one that I think your municipal association has been pushing around, that
Right.
Mount Pleasant has the same exact one, and I think a few other.
Is it exact?
This one is geared, it's almost identical to Somerville's. It's a little different than Mount Pleasant's, but they're all pretty similar and come from the municipal association.
So I guess to me, this, and this is really a state issue. Why isn't the state, do we know why the Senate hasn't put this to a vote or adopted it?
I do not know.
There's no everybody you talk to's got a different reason as to why they have not, but there's not been something that I could clearly say is the reason they have not, but it's kind of stalled out the last 2 legislative sessions.
Yeah. It's a shame that that's the case. I know we wrote a resolution to encourage them to do something on it, but they failed, I guess,
Yeah.
to do anything with it.
Chair, if I could weigh in. Again, a lot of discussion about this. This is a heated debate, not only locally, but across the nation, around the world, really. And I think in a perfect world, it would be great if our South Carolina General Assembly, House or Senate had effectively addressed this, as 48 other states have done so far, but they haven't, for whatever reason. You mentioned the resolution that we had a few years ago, which was the resolution that all of us voted affirmatively for. In fact, Councilwoman Anderson seconded the motion, and we voted unanimously to put a resolution in place to encourage the House, the State House, to address the Clementa C. Pinckney Hate Crime Act. And that was H. 3620 that was being considered by the Judiciary Committee, and it really went nowhere. Stopped dead in its tracks in committee. But we did what we thought was right at the time. And again, that was back in 2023, and everybody currently on council, other than one person who was not on council at that time, voted unanimously to do that. I think in the spirit of what we've done in the past, that we really ought to take a stand as a city and say, let's join other municipalities and try to put additional pressure on the State General Assembly to address this issue. And I don't know what the implications are for us at city level. I think we have to have some legal advice on that.
Yeah.
I mean, if we enact that ordinance, what does that mean for us? But I do think that it sends the right message to our visitors, to our residents, and anybody else that might consider the Isle of Palms a place to visit, a place to live, a place to play, that we won't tolerate anything that's even could be considered a violation of Title IX and those offenses. We've seen firsthand, we've had some violence here. We're considered one of the safest cities in the state and in the country, but we've had our moments where we've had violations, and whether that would be considered a hate crime or not, I don't know. But I think it just behooves us as a committee and as a council to at least address this issue in full council and put a stake in the ground and really challenge the State General Assembly to do something. And whatever they do, we have no control over, but at least we've done our
Well,
part
we do
at that point.
somewhat, but you
Somewhat, yeah.
Your vote could count, and I would
Exactly.
encourage people
Exactly.
to put pressure on the, and
It's just another, I think right now there's either 17 or 19 municipalities and counties now. Richland County just voted on this, and, and it's, to me, it just seems like it's the right thing, the right message to send.
And I don't disagree with you at all. I just think that this has a lot more teeth at a state level. I mean, and that's really where it belongs. It's pretty, I mean, we're talking about the consequences here as being a $500 fine. They can be, if there's multiple offenses, you can have multiple $500 fines, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty small.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to know from our
consequence
legal,
of-
from our legal representative, our city attorney, whatever, what does this mean for Isle of Palms?
Yes.
I mean, specifically, I mean, if somebody throws a water bottle at someone else out of anger, and it is one of the protected classes, does that mean that we have some sort of local charge and that ends up being a hate offense? I don't know. I don't know the
Maybe you know,
answer to
Chief.
that.
I do. I think, so for it to be considered in violation of this, we have to have something that says that it was based off of that individual's race, gender, identity. So it couldn't, just because I throw somebody at somebody of a different race doesn't mean that it rises to the hate crime. But if I communicate in a way, other language, as I'm doing it, that would indicate that I am doing this specifically because of.
A racial epithet or threat against a
And that-
protected
And that's why I
class.
wanted to get to the language in the ordinance, though, because what it says is, well, it says a person that violates Title IX, which really is our whole list of offenses, right? And then it says, with the intent to intimidate a person or persons in whole or in part because of the actual perceived race, color, creed, it goes on, I'll ask that. So it says, with the intent to intimidate. Is that,
So,
how do you, I guess I'm trying to just get to that language there, it's because that's,
so I would say that would qualify, like when we've got somebody burning a flag.
Yeah.
That is intimidating somebody. That's got a whole state statute with it, but it still doesn't, this would be triggered as well. One of the things that's beneficial from this is you have to be charged with the other charge in order to get this charge. So last year,
Convicted of the initial charge before really any.
we would make the
hate
charges simultaneous, but we would have to have that other charge. And if you were found not guilty of the other one, you would automatically be not guilty of this one.
Exactly.
We had some vandalism last year in the parking lot with racial slurs. That vandalism was clearly the racial slurs that were there would be intimidating to somebody else, and you had the vandalism on top of it. So had we identified that individual and we had this charge, this would have gone with that charge as well.
And there's also the argument some make that, that says, if you have the additional burden of proving a hate crime, it just adds more legal expense, it adds more bureaucracy or whatever else. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the ins and outs of all that, but it's like,
You still have the crime, that's.
right, the crime still has to be
Yes,
prosecuted and a person
yeah.
found either guilty or not guilty, presumed not guilty until they're convicted.
Correct.
That's a choice, I would say.
Yeah,
that the
I-
prosecutor can make.
But going back to me recommending that we, place it on the agenda to begin with, I just think that, to Ms. Rice's comments earlier, and others, Susan Hill Smith has reiterated the same. It's enough of an issue out there in our communities, whether it be local, state, national, international, that we at least ought to do our part to try to influence the State General Assembly to at least step up and address the issue.
Yes, I think we want to be one of those cities that is definitely opposed to people intimidating others for any of the reasons that we say here. And I think I think as a tourist community, we want to be welcoming, and this is the easiest way for us to do it, really, I think. And certainly to follow up with our state legislators and let them know that we want them to vote for it.
and when it says the sentences would run consecutive to one another, that means if you're charged with a Title IX offense, you'd be charged also with, and you were guilty of this, what we're defining as intimidation to one of these classes, you would be charged for both of them.
Correct. Consecutive has to do with sentencing. It's more so if you're convicted of the first one, which would be a municipal ordinance, which carries a maximum of 30 days, the judge could then find you guilty of this one and give you an additional 30 days. So you wind up doing 60
Yeah.
as opposed to just the 30. There are ways that they can do concurrent, but
Well, I mean, look, I don't know if we want to get, I think if you're happy with this, and then I'm probably happy with the language as long as you feel like it's enforceable and it gives you the language you need in order to give this additional charges. I'm fine with it. I don't know if you want to talk to Mac about it, or we want to. He usually doesn't come to workshops.
Yeah, I would-
request him.
Well, maybe we could get, maybe just his advice, Douglas, maybe that's something you could do.
Probably will want to give that in an executive session,
Mhm.
which would probably have, and I don't know that there's a problem with putting or recommending having an executive session at your July meeting for the purposes of
But it still
having
doesn't
this
preclude us from going ahead and making a recommendation here today that we take this to council workshop and have a full council discussion about this issue
Yes.
on July the 8th.
I seem to remember too, isn't it that most of the statutes are, criminal statutes are governed by the state legislature, and we don't really have much power as a municipality in terms of those kind of possible.
And I think to add to that, and this is only Title IX.
Yeah.
So if it's a violation of a state statute, we could not charge that
Correct.
person with this. And is
That,
that,
we'd have to make that change in here if we wanted to, and that, I would definitely want to make sure that
Well, wait,
council's
I
good with
want to
that.
make sure I'm clear on that now, you said, because in our Title IX, there are state statutes in our Title IX.
But we've covered them under our Title IX, so we'd still be
Okay.
fine with it under that.
So if there's a state statute that's not covered under Title IX, then you couldn't charge them with it.
Well, that would be something we would have to look at the wording.
It's similar, like, there's federal hate crime legislation,
Yeah.
but South Carolina doesn't have it. So unless it's a federal charge originating from South Carolina, like the Mother Emanuel issue,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is he?
So a lot of
there's no
times,
state charge for that.
a lot of times the way that works is
Yeah, because of federal.
we arrest them on a state level charge, and then we ask the federal agencies to come in and adopt those charges. And so we've already put them in jail. They then adopt those cases, and then they will indict them federally, and then our cases kind of go away because it's gone federal. Not all the time. Sometimes they will come in, especially with hate crimes here in South Carolina, we might have arrested them for the original violation, but they would come in and make a hate crime charge separate from that on a federal level.
Right.
I just think it makes a statement
I think we just.
that our community will not tolerate this kind of behavior.
I think we just go forward and we can make a motion.
Yeah, I make a motion that we take the discussion of hate crime legislation to council workshop on July the 8th.
I second.
do you want to wait on executive session? And do you want to take council's lead on that? If you need an executive session
I
at
think
the
you can
July
take it
meeting?
to workshop, and then
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
think there's an executive session in a
Right.
council
Come
meeting
out of
at the end
that.
of the month, then we can bring back, he'll be there anyway.
Yeah.
We can have an executive session.
Sounds
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, back to original agenda. We're in the new business procurement. Douglas, you want to run through all those procurement items?
Yeah, Chief, why don't you do
Or
this?
chief?
Sure. So we had in the budget to replace our ATVs. We've kept them as long as we can. Most of them are, we only have two, and they have turned out to be the best vehicles we have for patrolling the beach. They're the safest for us and the public. So we would be replacing two of those. This quote is under budget and includes two ATVs and the trailer to carry them. You want me to move on to the next one, or? Okay. The next one would be replacing one of our F-150 trucks. And remember, the thing with the vehicles are that the quote in front of you now is to just buy the vehicle. There's an added expense for all of the emergency equipment that comes into it, that comes separate.
So the budget, when you say that the budget is 67,000 and the truck is 48, by the time you add all the other stuff in, it's going to be close to budget?
It'll be close to, yes, sir.
Ah.
It'll come close to being, we might be under a little bit, but we'll get close. And some of these
Well,
will
that's
fluctuate.
helpful to know, because I thought we were like way under budget on all these things. I was saying-
No, so this is just, we've got to do this part to order the vehicles, and then it'll take a couple months before, sometimes several
Alright.
months before we have the vehicle.
That's good.
So you've got the truck for 48, and then the SUVs, there were two budgeted to be replaced in the budget year that just started today, and those are at $46,440 apiece. The quote in front of you is for the third one. The third one is an unbudgeted vehicle. One of our officers was involved in a collision on the connector, and that SUV was totaled as a result of that.
Yeah, what happened on that?
The officer attempted to turn around to stop a vehicle related to a call for service and did not properly wait enough time before conducting that U-turn and turned in front of another vehicle that went to go around them thinking they were just pulling to the side and T-boned. Yes, sir. And the officer was at fault, and we've addressed that internally. But the vehicle was totaled due to frame damage and things like that.
And I see in here it's unbudgeted, I mean, the $15,000 in insurance, but is that it? Is that all we get for that vehicle?
It had close to 100,000 miles on it. Most of our vehicles, they put mileage, they get close to 100,000 miles really quickly.
Is there any equipment that you can salvage from a vehicle like that can be pitted to other vehicles?
Yes, sir. We took everything that we could salvage out that we could use
Okay.
to help fix anything, or that we might be able to put into another vehicle, depending on the years. This was a Dodge Durango that was totaled, and we don't use Dodge Durangos for patrol anymore due to the location of the battery. It winds up costing $900 to change a battery in a Durango for patrol.
So the insurance is basically, the 15,000 is really just for the vehicle itself.
Correct.
You know, a stripped-down vehicle that doesn't have all the bells and
So
whistles.
what you're asking for money, though, is 46,000, because you're gonna use the insurance money to put
upfit.
all the equipment in, so it's still really around the $67,000.
Correct, yes, sir.
And if we didn't do that, what was the, I mean,
So
what would you do if we said we didn't want to spend an unbudgeted expense this year?
our backup would be to take that $15,000 and try to buy a vehicle from state surplus. Looking at those vehicles, you'll spend $15,000 to get a vehicle that's got 80 to 90,000 miles on it already, that's been used, and we're pulling down here. It won't look like the rest of our fleet. They're typically white,
But you need a vehicle.
yes, sir, we'll need a vehicle. Without it, we'll be short. We have enough now that we have one spare. And so when a car goes down for the shop, as long as only one goes down at a time, we're able to continue functioning. But without it, and that's with this vehicle. So without this vehicle, we don't have that spare.
We're gonna have Hertz cars while we're doing it.
All right, so do you want us to vote on these? Do we want to vote on them individually or all, or?
Probably individually, unless you,
I propose we vote.
Could we just do
all as a
it,
group.
yeah, collectively as a group and recommend?
do you want
The
to,
only
I
one-
guess,
The only last, I want to just make sure there's no discussion
Yeah.
about the last one. If
Oh.
there's any
The last
other-
one is
the-
unique, I
The
think.
wrecked vehicle, if there's any,
If we can afford it, I mean, that's the thing, is we've got enough surplus in our budget to cover this. right?
yes.
well, it's not budgeted, but, yeah.
There is money in the bank that can cover it, but it is
All right,
unbudgeted.
then if there's no other discussion about it, then I would just say we just do them all together.
Hmm?
I propose that we approve the procurements listed 1, 2, 3, and 4 as listed.
Second?
So it really be 3 SUVs, 1 truck, and 1
trailer.
ATV.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. KTV and trailer.
ATV and trailer.
2 ATVs and trailer.
I seconded it.
2 ATVs.
Yes, sir.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
The next item is discussion of changing parking requirements at 44th Avenue in the city marina. Douglas, you probably ought to preface this.
Yes, this is, this is in relation to the marina parking lot adjacent to, it's really right across the street from Station 2. The city has an ordinance in effect that says that it is okay to park a trailer in that area between Waterway Boulevard and the entrance of the marina, where that used to be an open ditch. Since that ordinance was put into effect, the city has piped that ditch and has created perpendicular parking spaces, which you can no longer park a trailer in. So.
Is it because they won't fit, you're saying?
That's
A trailer and a
correct.
car won't fit in that space?
Not perpendicular. So what we're finding is what happened at least 2 weekends ago is we had trailers parked, they were parked parallel to the road, and they were taking up 3, 4, 5 car spaces.
Okay.
Those particular ones were not residents, and so it was a moot point, but the point was made, well, what if a resident did do that? They take up 5 spaces with 1 trailer.
But our current ordinance allowed residents to park there parallel.
That's correct.
Before we pipe the ditch.
That's correct.
So this is just to.
It's kind of a
okay, now we've
cleanup
got
to address the change in orientation of the parking spaces.
And to make sure that there's no non-resident parking there also.
Well, residents can park
Oh.
there for a fee, but non-residents
Non-residents.
park there as a fee.
For a fee,
That's
okay.
correct.
Okay.
But residents park there free.
Correct.
Okay.
We just don't want boat trailers taking up 5, 6,
And we're
7.
sure that a boat trailer, if it pulled in, would not be able to fit.
We have had people do that, but they had to pull over the parking stops and up against the fence to do it. So, yeah, they would not fit in a normal space. Yeah, that was the first. And maybe that was before the stops were physically in place, but they were pulling right up to the fences.
And that's how close they live.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do angle parking if we decided we needed more
I mean, I don't,
trailer parking.
We have been down this
Yeah.
rabbit hole with,
So good for that.
with Matt Klein. He says that it does not fit.
all right. Any questions or comments?
You will have a recommendation on that one?
I
Yeah.
make a motion, we accept the language on parking as written.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Miscellaneous, next meeting is August 5th, 2025. And one thing I'd like to see us talk about is e-bikes. Seems to be a lot of interest coming in on e-bikes. It's just like, what is I think Mount Pleasant was also doing some stuff, so they'd be interested in what they have. Plus, you did a brochure and just general discussion on any kind of safety around that we should be considering on e-bikes.
That we can do locally because the state really doesn't do a lot.
Right.
Right. And Mount Pleasant's just taking a lot of action, so I've got
Yeah.
fresh stuff to look at.
Right.
Good.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah, I know that Wild Dunes has been grappling with that issue. They don't have any solutions yet.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.